everybody need to validate it. So everybody knows, not just everybody knows that you are legit recipients of this asset transfer. So basically, it's affecting the service of documents providing digital platform for confidential information sharing. So this is way to go here. Could transform everything in terms of a paper contract, check, say for example. Thailand, we still use paper checks. And why do we use paper check? Is it that because we don't have digital signatures law? No, we do have. We have is banking system having a digital sort of image processing check? Yes, we do. Everybody now banks, they just take image of the checks and then settlement with other banks. You don't need to wait for physical check. But the reason why we need physical checks now is if you run into legal problems, you go to courts, you're not certain because it's not precedented before that your digital checks is qualified as evidence in courts. So there are these type of things, but of course it's impediments, and we'll be there no saw to think that this will not come into fruition if all else got cleared up. So sooner or later, my point is it's going to come. Okay. Now the nuance about this smart contract is that sometimes legal people, you guys heard of ISDA? Like the ISDA contract, if you do FX forwards and derivatives with banks. Let me tell you frankly, we are at banks, we don't know how to read it because it's so encrypted. It's naturally, inherently encrypted. So sometimes, say for example, if you put a clause of material evidence, material changes, oh, what the hell is material change? It is material. If X happens, oh, you can't define, you have to judge in courts, right? Also, the other terms, say for example, good faith, force majeure, negligence, reasonableness, all these in current legal context, this is going to be a very big hurdles for smart contract to happen because of the vagueness of the word. If you can't interpret it in a logical manner, you can code it. When you can't code it, the smart contract cannot be executed. Right? So that's one hurdle we have to jump. And then of course there's questions about is it really legally binding? Is the court in this jurisdiction accept it? If you do it with another jurisdiction, do they also accept it? So a lot of these implications coming on as whether it's legally binding. So there need to be, my point is go back to, there need to be consortium with a lot of endorsement and support from regulators to see it happen. Of course, we talk about jurisdiction issues, dispute resolutions, arbitrations. If you do international trades, even if your LC is clear, it doesn't mean that you get paid, right? There's a lot of dispute about that, about the quality of the goods and such, so that thing still persists. But my point is that the potential smart contract is so prominent that banks are seriously considering it, even for local banks like us. How do we get on board with the global payment system? Digital currency is just a mean to an end. And then of course, lawyers. I run on time for 10 minutes, so my apologies. Of course, if it can be put in smart contract, it can get executed. So conveyance, wills and estates. Say for example, you write a will, you don't need lawyers to, let me keepsake and uphold the will that's not tempered by. And then when the person die, and then the lawyers, like in the movies, they come out, and then sir, it has been assigned to me that this. Okay. So that would just automatically execute it. So no pun intended for any legal professionals, colleagues. I'm just a bank employee, and I know representations in any shape or form of TMB banks right now. It's going to be automated, so a lot of things will be bypassed. But of course, you can take on more things. There's going to be more high volume and low risk transactions that you can do faster. Okay. So if anything that is not before put in a legally binding contract, it can at a lower cost. So there's an implication of that. Lawyers may need programming. I think this is a bit far-fetched, but probably you have to understand somewhat of the way algorithm works. Say the clause of condition is satisfied, then if, then else, then what, or else if, then what. And I'm starting going to unknown area now. But so my last words is that the point is not Bitcoins, Ethereum, Ripple, they're all here not to stay. They can change because it's not real strong underlying issues, but the platform, the concept that enabled this to exist is very powerful. And as employees of a bank, I would be extremely ignorant to say that, or to talk down of it, or to say that it's not relevant. Because it's not relevant now, could define the futures of actually financial services. That's actually my point of view. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to hand the mic over back to our speaker. It's time for questions and answers, and I'll let you pick. Well, I'll start off. Who's got? There's got to be questions here. This is a fascinating presentation. Questions? Okay. We have more than one speaker. I mean, more than one physical speaker. Microphone.
Hi. Thanks. That was really interesting. My understanding is that one of the cryptocurrencies, Ripple, was sort of created by the banks or by this consortium of the banks specifically to effectively compete with SWIFT, or to, so what's the status of that, and is that, do you know anything about that?
Actually, major banks own the Ripples in equity terms, so they're supporting it all in. Now, actually, in some markets, actually, you can use Ripple to make the transfer very quickly. Say from Thai to Japan, there's some Thai banks that already embarked on. SCB, one of the biggest banks in Thailand, actually actively own the Ripple company. So they're not that they own the Bitcoin parts, the cryptocurrency part, but for using digital currency as a mean for settlement, yes, they're all on this, and major big banks, they are actually seriously considering this. And it has been done in a limited environment, sort of a sandbox type limited environment already. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, layman's question. Who actually owns these blockchain computers?
Basically, you and I, or your kids. The nice thing about this is that it's so decentralized, so everybody can partake on it. But of course, if you team it up, you're going to have more computing power, more storage. You can compute faster, you can decrypt it faster. So there's a benefit of collusions. But then it's sort of decentralized anyway, so anybody, if you willing to join, doesn't matter where you are, could be in Bangladesh, could be United States, could be Bangkok, we all can join. So the ownerships of the hardware basically is the people.
But could that be regulated later?
I think public blockchain is pretty difficult to be regulated. It's virtually impossible because it's anonymous and it's so fragmented that you can't really pinpoint or ID antibodies. But I think way to go is not probably on the public blockchain, but on the consortium base of private blockchain types. It's going to be characterizing the way financial services go. Of course, black economy is there. and it's gonna be there always. So there's, of course, a natural demand to support the public blockchains. Of course, if you wanna be off the radars, off the AMLOs, off the tax, off the FATCAs and such. Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah. What's the outlook for the Thai regulators to change their position on these cryptocurrencies? When are we going to see ATMs for buying and redeeming?
I think virtually it's almost impossible in short run to see Bank of Thailand allows it to be a proper currency. If you talk about ICO to raise fund using it, that's sort of based on more of a SEC, Security Exchange Commission, which is more receptive. I'm just so close to them, I think they all get stuff. So I think the BOT has stance that is not very aligned with the SEC. ICO is there, I think it would be possible. Minister of Finance, well, somehow it said, I say this, but our Minister of Finance has actually a lot of power, more than BOT governors. So ICO is going to happen, but digital currency is going to stay off the radar, off the records, I think. Will not be regularized or legalized in any shape or form soon. Yes, yes, ma'am.
So what do you think about the RegTech? And can it be a financial instrument for the central bank to regulate the Bitcoin?
RegTech or regulatory technologies based. I don't think it can. It's possible, but I don't think in very likely manner it probably would not be able to help help in terms of regulatory perspective on that. I think RegTech has a lot of potential in terms of electronic KYC, know your identity. Right now, if you want to transact with banks, you have to at least be present physically, right? So RegTech is going to come in to sort of help verify IDs and such. Instead of physical presence, you have digital presence, and it's more on that, I think, development than itself about onto digital currency. Yes, sir.
You've shown that cryptocurrencies start to begin to take some part of the economic transfers and transactions, like a certain percentage of the economy. And I agree with you that the tokens, the smart contracts, have an unimaginable future in terms of possibilities. We have no idea yet. But for currencies, do you think that the cryptocurrencies can or will compete with national sovereign currencies or fiat currencies? And how? And how do you think governments will respond? Because it's going to be a threat, possibly.
I think, is it compatible? If you look at currency itself, now you're saying US is not that, no political side here, but they are less active when it comes to global trades, right? They're saying China is more active, but there's been talk about 10 years in China entered the WTO. So far, how much got settled in Chinese yuan or renminbi? It's very small. So it's really hard to deinstitutionalize US dollars. Really, really difficult. By global trade basis, the settlement, I think about 70% majority is still in US dollars, even though you trade outside US dollars territories, United States territory. The second one is pound, and then euros, and then Japanese yen. So in this context, to see whether it get peeled off and then replaced by digital currency, I think it's quite unlikely in the short runs. Digital currency gonna come when it's regulated, and it's not gonna be democratized, if you will. Very sensitive, but for this, it's not gonna be, I think, for end users or end consumer. It's just gonna be for bank to settle the bank between banks. So it's more like potentialized in more interbank settlement. While when banks interact with end customers, they're going to keep on either on Thai baht basis, US dollar basis. So it's not going to be democratized digital currency as I visualize that it exists now. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think there's another aspect to it. That cryptocurrencies are anonymous, they're distributed, they're transparent. None of the governments want. They want closed and centralized. And
Traceable.
Control, yeah.
Control, indeed.
So, but they see that the distributed ledger technology is an enormous potential for controlling the money. So I think they will go into it, but with their own versions.
Yes, I think I definitely agree with you. With their own versions, and it will not be democratized or open to public. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I had kind of the same vision as you, sort of playfully betting on Ripple recently, because I thought, that was the most congruent with my vision of the future. But the market doesn't agree with me.
Yeah.
Do you have any comment?
I could not confirm nor deny the future directions, but
Well, why does if we both agree what the future looks like,
yeah.
why does Mr. Market think otherwise?
Because I think it's populated not by real transactions, it's populated by speculative forces so far. In the past year, you can't really expect that. If you look at the jumps here, it's so significant that, wow, I'm going a long way to this. Sorry, I think I spent 60 slides on you, so my apologies on that.
Great slide.
Oh, thank you. You can't really fathom that within 3 months, there's going to be this much exponentially growth, burst of volumes of real transaction. This is really speculative boost. It's like a tulip bubble. Well, besides without the tulips.
Just a quick comment on the Ripple. The Ripple has two parts. It's got the Ripple network, which the banks use, and they can still use fiat currencies to use it. They don't have to use Ripple. They can use Ripple, but they don't have. When the Ripple was very popular, everybody thought the banks had to use Ripple, so it's got to go on. That's not the case.
Thank you. Yes, sir? Oh, okay. Yes. Want to shine some light on Ripples. Okay. It's definitely up and coming.
Yeah, just a quick question on the.
Yeah, you can go first.
There's some government trying to issue their own cryptos, for example, as preference. We heard that it's a report Venezuela, they're going to do the petrols. And there's some countries, as far as we have heard in Africa, where they own currency, their currency volatile, a lot more than this, What is your comment on that?
I think it takes more than one central bank or one country to pull it off. I think it's going to take a band of brothers, if you will, to willingly commit to this. Whether for tax purpose, for AMLO, anti-money laundering purpose, I think the chance of going it alone on the country level, I think it's still slim. Except if you're China, big enough, domestically. But if you deal with more externals, you have a lot of international trade per portion of your GDP. I think it's quite hard to pull it off. So I think that's my take on that. Yes, sir?
Yeah, so I just wanted to speak in terms of security, in terms of the future of blockchain itself. One of the things that makes it so secure is its distributed nature, like you said, which is what makes it sort of so impossible, let's say, to hack right now. And if you want to, you have to hack it at the digital wallet level rather than the distributed ledger. However, in terms of the future, theoretically speaking, the concept of quantum computers could potentially sort of break that trend and make blockchain unsecure in the future, theoretically speaking. So what are your views on that?
I think there's even theoretical papers done by some professors, I think US, about using quantum computers, quantum computings.
Forget about Amazon account is gone.
Yeah.
It's everything if that happens.
I think it's viable, but See, I don't want to underestimate the access or penetrations of this technology. It's going so fast by the Moore's law. So I think it's probably gonna be faster, but it's also itself gonna make it the hash instead of 256-bit encryptions. They're gonna keep on adding that on top of that. So, but how fast the quantum computing leap us forward versus the difficulties of the complexity of the codes, I think that's probably depends on that. But it's viable. It's viable. But in equilibrium, it will catch up. It will catch up. Everything balances itself out. This basically you can't really in Thai you can't ride tiger with bare hands. You basically cannot generate values out of nothing. So it needs to catch up in sort of entry points or demands of transactions.
More comments, questions?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll take one, and let me just explain. I'm coming at this from a legal perspective, and my concerns are investor protection and consumer protection. You've spoken very well about the massive uncertainties about whether this is a currency, in which case in Thailand it will be regulated by the Bank of Thailand ultimately, or whether it's a security, in which case in Thailand it will be regulated by the SEC. How do you see trends in regulation at the moment? I mean, I think it's fair to say, my colleague Doug will correct me on this, that even in the US there is uncertainty about what this cryptocurrency is in legal terms and how should it be regulated from the perspective of investor protection. How do you see the trends in regulation working out over the next couple of years?
That's very good questions. I think for Thailand, I couldn't say for other countries, regulators are way over their head a little bit. Let me ask you this. If digital currency or ICO, whatever it is, it's peer-to-peer, right? So it's a contract, but they say the contract is anonymous. So is currently our contractual related law support that? Say for example, promissory note law, is it supporting the fact that you don't know what Mr. A lends out to what Mr. B, do not know who it is? So I think law itself hasn't catch up with the regulators. And regulators, well, they have authority, but they need tools, and that tools is basically laws. So I don't think it's even yet. It's not there yet. And especially when it comes to investor protections, because it's P2P, it's anonymous. Contract is not legally binding in Thai jurisdictions. I do not know, I'm bank employees, but I guess it's not. And if it's by nature of this, ICOs, for example, it's not one-to-one match. It's not A owns it to B, but it's many A's own to many B's, and they are all anonymous. How would you resolve if there's dispute or trace for responsibilities or accountability? I think it's very far-fetched. They can allow ICO, but then this thing is going to be a time box. According to some statistics, almost 50% of ICO has failed in other countries. So it's become a scam instead of a real funding sources. No, yes ma'am, thank you. No reference to JMAT or whatever, but yeah. Yes, sir.
One other area that I'm hoping you have any knowledge of, I've heard a rumor, but I don't know how real it is, on how the Thai government is going to tax profits on cryptocurrencies.
I think Thai government has a lot of other things to do. First, the thing they need to do, because they are so behind on the tax collections because they cannot track e-commerce. That's probably the first thing they will put all their efforts in. How do you track online transactions? This is not ecosystem like United States in which you have a big players. Federal government go to Amazon to trace it, but here they're not single majority players that track it. So there's other issues that they want to cope with. I'm not touching the political side of things here. I'm on the practical side of the Ministry of Finance. So I think they have more of other priorities. Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir.
Just one other point that you didn't really touch on, but just curious if you have thoughts on, is that not related to currency, but just blockchain concept. The trust that's embedded in that concept is the fact that everybody can see everything that happened, and therefore, it can't be faked. But implicit in that thought is the concept of personal data protection. In that if I can see everything about everybody, I want to buy a house from you, and I say, oh, let's see, do you own it? Oh, blockchain says you don't really own the house. Everybody can know everything about everybody. Otherwise, if they can't, then the whole concept doesn't really work. So there's kind of a bit of a conflict there, which I think from a legal perspective is going to take some managing.
I do agree. I totally agree with you on that. The thing is, if you go along with the public blockchain concept, it's not going to work because it's anonymous. So it's not going to be able to transfer the entitlements of properties or assets. That one, I think we need private blockchain, so consortium-based blockchain to make it happen. And of course, that comes, if it's private or consortium-based players, which is basically the bookkeepers or banks or whatever, they have regulations, current regulations they have to abide by for privacy rights and such. So more or less, I think it will happen on the private ones regarding the other application. I think majority of applications will be in the private blockchains, not the public blockchains.
So on the blockchain, you can see everything except the identity of the recipient and the sender.
Right, but if the purpose of that transaction requires that, then what he was just saying, then
it's peer-to-peer.
Right, but you still need to know that you are. I'm able to transact with you because the thing, if there's a contract, then the thing you're selling me, I have to know that you actually have the right to sell it, that you own it, right?
Right, but that's on another blockchain where the ownership rights have been changed.
Right, but there's a certain, if you expose information about yourself in a way that is perhaps more than what you might want to expose if you were going to be doing just an individual transaction. It's sort of, you have to make it available, and it's a distributed database, so that information about you has to be everywhere, and that's hidden.
I think for the public blockchains, the information that goes out is transactional information. Right. It's not profiling information. Right. So they know that this transaction cannot be verified or validated, but they do not know if it belongs to whose profile or exactly they can ID it. So
doesn't that create regulatory problems? Because if you're doing a transaction with someone who's banned from
Indeed.
So, that creates an incentive for people that are prohibited from engaging in transactions or engaging in prohibited transactions to use cryptocurrency.
That's exactly why Thai banks never, even if allowed, want to engage with that. Because we have to pass a sanction law in AMLO. So if you transact with North Korea, then it's illegal by the law regulations of Bank of Thailand. So that's why I think public blockchain will not be touched by formal sectors of financial services. I think for certain, pretty much for certain. Because we don't know who we're dealing with. And one basic bread and butter of brick and mortar banking is know your customer. You can't ID them, you can't verify them, can't authenticate them later on, then you're not allowed to transact.
Okay. I think we've reached 8 o'clock, so a round of applause for everybody.
I know Stephen and I have a few housekeeping matters, but are you going to stick around for a few? I know you must be tired. Okay, if people have questions, I don't want to impose on you. Stephen, do you want to lead off with housekeeping?